There is a creature that has walked this earth for millions of years. It is the largest land animal alive. It can weigh over 6 tons. A single one of them could feed an entire village for weeks, and yet almost no human on the planet eats one. Not in restaurants, not in grocery stores, not in survival situations, not even in countries where food is scarce. Think about how strange that is. We eat cows, we eat pigs, we eat horses in some places, we eat insects and jellyfish and things most people would consider disgusting. But the biggest, most meat-rich land animal on Earth? We leave it alone. Why? Most people assume the answer is simple. It is endangered, they say. It is protected. It is illegal. And yes, that is true now. But that is not the answer. That is the result of something else entirely. The real reason goes much deeper, and it tells you something strange and fascinating about the hidden rules your own brain follows without your permission. Stay until the end, because the last part reveals something about your own food choices that you have probably never thought about consciously before. So let us start at the beginning. Elephants have lived alongside humans for hundreds of thousands of years. Ancient humans hunted them. There is fossil evidence of this going back at least 400,000 years. Sites in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East show early humans butchering elephant carcasses, cracking open their bones, scraping out the marrow. For a long time, the elephant was not off the menu. It was the menu. A single mammoth or straight-tusked elephant represented an enormous caloric windfall. Researchers estimate that a large elephant could provide somewhere between 1 and 2,000 pounds of meat. For a small band of hunter-gatherers, that was potentially weeks of food. So our ancient ancestors did eat elephant. They ate a lot of it. And then, at some point, something shifted. The relationship between humans and elephants changed. Slowly. Across thousands of years, in ways that went far beyond hunger and survival. Elephants began to be used for work. In Asia, the domestication of the Asian elephant began somewhere around 4,000 years ago. Elephants were used for logging, for warfare, for transportation, for construction. They became tools, partners, assets, and you do not eat your tools. In India, elephants were elevated further. They became sacred. They became associated with Ganesha, the elephant-headed god of wisdom and new beginnings. Killing an elephant was not just impractical. It became morally unthinkable. In parts of Africa, different but equally powerful cultural structures formed around elephants. Many communities saw them as beings with a spiritual connection to the land, to ancestors, to the natural order. The elephant shifted from prey to something else entirely. But here is what is fascinating. This shift was not just cultural, it was also emotional. And that emotional component turns out to be the key to understanding why you, sitting wherever you are right now, also do not eat elephant. Because you have almost certainly never made a conscious decision about this. You have never sat down and weighed the pros and cons. You have never thought, should I eat elephant today? The idea probably feels slightly wrong to you before you can even reason about it. That feeling has a name. Psychologists call it the meat paradox. The meat paradox describes the tension between liking animals and eating them. Humans resolve this tension, largely unconsciously, by dividing animals into categories. Some animals are food, some animals are not food. And the brain does this sorting automatically, based on a complicated set of signals that you absorbed from your culture, your language, your childhood, and the people around you. Researcher Paul Rozin at the University of Pennsylvania has studied this phenomenon for decades. He found that the dividing line between edible and inedible animals is not really about taste, or availability, or nutritional value. It is about what psychologists call the 3 N's: natural, normal, and necessary. Humans tend to eat animals when eating them feels natural in their culture, normal among the people around them, and necessary for survival or sustenance. Elephants fail the normalcy test almost everywhere on Earth. And once something is categorized as not food, it triggers a very specific psychological response: disgust, Disgust is not a rational emotion. It operates at a level below conscious thought. And once it attaches to something, it is almost impossible to shift through argument alone. You can tell someone that elephant meat is high in protein. You can tell them it is available. You can present a perfectly logical case, and their brain will still flinch. Because the brain is not running a logic program. It is running a disgust program. And that program was written by your culture before you were old enough to question it. Here is where it gets even stranger. Elephants have a set of qualities that human brains are particularly sensitive to. Qualities that amplify the disgust response and make them feel especially off limits. The first is intelligence. Elephants are among the most cognitively sophisticated animals on Earth. They recognize themselves in mirrors. They mourn their dead. They have been observed returning to the bones of relatives long after death, touching them with their trunks, standing quietly over them in what researchers believe is a form of grief. Joyce Poole, who has studied African elephants for over 40 years, documented elephants remaining with a dead family member for days, refusing to leave. That behavior is disquieting in a very specific way. It crosses a line that human brains draw unconsciously, the line between creatures that react to the world and creatures that seem to understand it. When something seems to understand its own existence, eating it starts to feel like something closer to violence than survival. The second quality is social complexity. Elephants live in matriarchal family groups. Grandmothers lead, aunts babysit. Young males are raised with careful social guidance from older bulls. The family unit is recognizable in a way that makes a human brain uncomfortable. You are not looking at prey. You are looking at a family. Evolutionary psychologists suggest this is not an accident. Human brains evolved to be exquisitely sensitive to social structures because understanding other social structures helped humans navigate their own. Seeing a mother elephant shelter her calf activates the same neural circuits that process human family bonds. The third quality is longevity. Elephants live for 60 to 70 years. They are older than many of the humans around them. They develop individual personalities over decades. They are known by researchers and communities as individuals, not as members of a herd. There is something psychologically significant about eating an animal that has been alive longer than you have. Researchers have noted that long-lived animals with individual identities are consistently placed in the not-food category by humans across many cultures. So here is where we are. Elephants moved from prey to sacred over thousands of years. That transition was driven by their use as labor and their cultural elevation as spiritual symbols. On top of that, their cognitive sophistication, their social structures, and their longevity trigger psychological responses that make eating them feel instinctively wrong. But there is one more layer. The practical reality of elephants as food is also quietly working against them, and this part is rarely discussed. Elephants take an extraordinarily long time to reproduce. A female elephant is pregnant for 22 months. That is the longest gestation period of any land animal. She will typically have one calf at a time. She will not be ready to reproduce again for several years. Compare that to a cow, which can be pregnant for 9 months, produce a calf annually, and reach slaughter weight in about 18 months. Elephants simply cannot reproduce fast enough to sustain a harvest. Any human population that tried to use elephants as a primary meat source would deplete them almost immediately. This was not a calculated decision early humans made, but over time the societies that treated elephants as a renewable food source collapsed that resource. The societies that treated them as something else, as labor, as sacred beings, as ecological actors, preserved them. The cultural taboo and the ecological reality reinforced each other, and over generations the taboo calcified into something that no longer felt like a choice. It became a moral intuition. It became disgust. It became the thing you feel before you can even form a thought about it. Cynthia Moss, one of the longest-serving elephant researchers in the world, spent over 50 years documenting elephant family histories in Amboseli. She watched individual elephants age, give birth, grieve, and die. She described the experience as impossible to separate from her sense of their personhood. And that word, personhood, is the crux of everything. The reason we do not eat elephants today is not primarily the law. The law reflects a deeper shift in how humans categorize these animals. Elephants in the collective human imagination have crossed a threshold. They are no longer just wildlife. They are beings with minds, with families, with memories. And once a species crosses that threshold in human psychology, removing them from the food category is not a decision. It is a feeling. It is a gut reaction that precedes any rational thought. Think about what that means for you. Every food choice you make is partly conscious. You choose what looks good, what you can afford, what you are in the mood for. But underneath those choices, there is a vast invisible system. A system of categories and taboos you absorbed before you could speak. A system that is dividing the world into food and not food without your knowledge. A system that generates feelings of disgust and comfort that feel like instincts but are actually rules you learned from everyone around you. The elephant never asked to be placed in the not food category, and the chicken never asked to be placed in the opposite one. The difference at its deepest level is not nutrition. It is not taste. It is not even law. It is the story your culture told you before you were old enough to tell your own. And most people go their entire lives eating exactly what they were taught to eat, feeling disgust for what they were taught to find disgusting, and never once realizing that somewhere in their brain, a rule is running. Quiet, automatic, absolute. The elephant is still out there, older than almost any human alive, mourning its dead, raising its young, living inside a social world that our brains recognize without understanding why. And without thinking about it, you have already made your decision. You made it a long time ago. You just do not remember when.